Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. Thank you for tuning into another Supatease video, and the alarm bells are going off. I have some grave concerns for what this new addition to patch 11.1.5 could mean, especially for PvP. Now, Mythic Plus players are very happy about it. They're very excited about it, but from a PvP perspective and standpoint, this era of time, I do not think was remembered particularly fondly, and that is that in 11.1.5 they are bringing back BFA corruption effects, and some of these ones were ridiculous the first time around. And also in today's video we are going to be looking at kind of the first progression of this week's progress towards the classes and specializations and which ones look like they're performing. So if you want to keep an eye on that, pulse on that to see what's going on with your specialization, how overall is it doing, are you seeing results that are favorable to what your peers are of your specialization, and the like. And if you want to make sure that you're staying up to date with news related to World of Warcraft, then make sure to smash that subscribe button. Now, the specific corruption effects, they've listed them here. Echoing Void, which was basically just radiating AoE damage from your character. This was an enchant that was typically taken by tanks. Now, I do think, depending on if this is health percentage based, like it used to be, which it doesn't look like it is on this, that it's going to be really good because HP is just really high. So if you're a melee DPS of any kind that has a lot of stamina, Echoing Void is going to be crazy. It's going to be ridiculous. It's going to do a ton of damage. Twilight Devastation was the other one. That was like the main tank thing. And I really wonder what they're going to do, what their intent is with the tuning on this, because I think one of the main reasons Mythic Plus players liked these corruption effects so much was that it kind of balanced the playing field, and that was because they did like 80% of your damage. You weren't even a class. It was just your corruption. And everyone had the same corruption, so everyone was the same, so the game was balanced. So I do think it's like a bit misleading in that sense, to say that like corruption effects is what made Mythic Plus so good because everything was balanced, when it was just your corruption was literally 80% of your class. So I'm a bit concerned about if it's 80% of your class in PvP, because then it's like your impact of your character doesn't matter as much. It's just this random proccing effect completely takes over. Gushing Wounds was the big one for rogues and demon hunters. These guys just absolutely destroyed with this one, and applied a damage over time effect to the target that just absolutely destroyed it. And it looks like it's going to be pretty similarly. I don't know if these numbers are 100%, and this is what it's going to be. It also looks like they come from the visions, which, again, if your PvP player doesn't want a PvE, I think this is going to be annoying if you have to do these in order to get these. And hopefully they're not RNG. That if they layered this on top of it, if corruptions are RNG and is doing 80% of my character's damage, and I can never get the one that I want, I'm going to be really mad. I'm going to be madge. So like the fact that it says it comes from the chest makes me think that it's RNG. And I'm going to hold my anger in until actually seeing it or testing it to claim that 100%, but I'm really hoping this is not an RNG drop. Infinite Stars, oh my god, I remember the prop paladins in a tournament that ran Infinite Stars, and they just stacked it up max corruption, and then they just blasted. The other thing too, though, is I don't think we're going to have corruption to scale them, so it's likely just going to be a static number. It's entirely possible that they just pick up, oh, that doesn't look like a very low number. That looks like 1 million damage. Am I dumb on the numbers here? That's 7 digits. Twilight Devastation is going to be hitting for millions of damage. Wait, so is this one. No, that's 100,000. I feel like these numbers have to be placeholders. There's no way. These numbers have to be placeholders, because why would this one be 1 million and then this one's only 100K? I don't think I don't think these numbers can be 100% right. But Infinite Stars, you stacked a bunch of corruption, which summoned in these demons that would attack you. But Infinite Stars proc one-shot people, so you can play a prop paladin, make yourself immune to damage, and then proc Infinite Stars on everybody and absolutely KO them. Twilight Devastation was good for like a day, I think, before it got nerfed. And it was, again, mostly tanks running around in PvP with this because their HP, it scaled off your HP. It doesn't look like it might be scaling with your HP this time around. But I have some grave concerns for it. And these ones still, it looks like they come from different chests. It looks like it depends maybe some of them are named Umbric or Valera. So I don't know if you like pick an ally to aid you, or it's like a specific challenge on those corruption levels. The Twisted Appendage, remember this one? I think it was Peekaboo. Is on a rogue and he was poking people and he was summoning these void tentacles that would just laser targets down. I think it's very similar to the Girthalak effect from Cataclysm, the sword that warriors used to use as well as the Void Ritual, which was like the secondary stat stacking stick for, I think Destrolox mostly used it. Now, it doesn't look like they're bringing in the additional effects that allowed you to raise your secondary stats to like ridiculous levels and values. But ironically enough, I think the baseline stats can get your character's power pretty close to corruption levels by the time we're fully geared, even just this season, because we're entering like the millions of health pools. Our secondary stats are going to be above 30% in a lot of cases, at least for the ones that you're stacking. So I feel like you can, depending on the numbers they pick for this, it could be ridiculous. Maybe the Mythic Plus people will be happy just because it balances the classes, because it does 80% of their classes damage. In PvP, maybe they're just going to nerf it by 80% or something, because I think that it's treated as an enchant. So it's going to technically be replacing the weapon enchant you already have. So maybe their goal is to nerf it to the point where it's equal to what the Auction House enchant would be anyways. But I don't know how you do that, because most of these are like on-hit damage effects. I guess the enchant technically right now is an on-hit damage effect that gives you primary stat, and these ones don't. So maybe it's possible that they don't completely take over. But I think with us, revisiting the Void, Xalatath, everything else like that, I think they've tied it into the story that they want to try and bring back like a throwback. And obviously for Mythic Plus, they really liked it because it allowed their characters to do ridiculously high amounts of damage. But I don't know in PvP if that's going to be the same case. At least we don't have the versatility stacking thing that makes everyone unkillable. I will say that. I'm going to we got to take our wins here when we get them. At least we don't have the stacking versatility. It is just on hit damage procs. And this is all just an easy like tuning knob, tuning adjustment. But my initial assessment is that it looks like this only comes from the visions, and I don't want to have to do that on all of my characters. And my memory from these corruptions was that they were very cheesy. They, tanks were viable because of them. And they did 80% of your damage. So as a player, it felt like your inputs on your character didn't matter, because it was just Gushing Wounds procced, and that was all of your damage. So those are the negative trade-offs for me on this, and my thoughts. And what are your thoughts on corruptions? Are you excited about this? Am I an old fuddy-duddy? Let me know in the comments down below. But we've also got some stats to look at. So I'm going to readjust this screen here really quick, because these stats basically are for about close to now, the first couple of days of the season, and we can start looking at the performance of specializations. And I know what's jumping off the page right now to most people is going to be this white line that's just like going to the ceiling, and that white line is Discipline Priest. So we're currently looking at 1800 plus rating, which honestly not a lot of players have gotten to, I would say. Now MMR honestly is in a better spot. I think that you can get rating easier than the start of season 1, which is nice. They didn't make any post about it. I don't know why they don't want to take W's when there are W's, or maybe it's accidental. I don't know. But the MMR does seem like it's better for the start of season 2, but it's only a couple days in, so 1800 plus is pretty limited. Regardless, though, Disc Priests are over 50% of the healers. They're over 50% of the healers, and they're super OP in PvE. So if I had to guess today, they're probably going to do nerfs to Discipline Priest. I really hope, at least in PvP, that they focus in on buffing the other healers, because healing right now is really hard. Damage is really high. And a lot of the underperforming healers just cannot keep up with it at all. So like when we're looking at like Resto Druid, I think Resto Druid needs a lot of help. Holy Priest is outperforming Resto Druid. That doesn't happen very often. Usually Holy Priest is like the least represented healer overall. Mistweaver, after the Crackle nerfs, has definitely struggled. In my initial predictions for it, being a top performer, it's definitely looking like it's a lot harder of a time. I have honestly, and this graph represents it, have been doing better on my Shaman. I've actually been enjoying playing my Shaman the most of all the healers that I've played, and it's coming in at a 15%. Disc still holds the value of just kind of being the most fun, but it's one of the only healers that can really deal with all of this insane burst damage, because it has so many damage mitigation cooldowns of substantial values like pain suppression to actually survive openers with the amount of damage a lot of these classes can do that are represented towards the top. So I'm not really surprised to see this, but I'd really like to see them focus on buffing, because for me this patch was all about them improving their healer balance, so our queues are faster. If you have half the healer specs are just like not able to compete, they queue into a Disc Priest and they give up, you've just lost all those players. So healer balance is super important for PvP. I'd say it's more important than anything else. Honestly, everything else is a lot closer. So focus in on the healer balance. Get these 4 on the bottom a little bit better towards these guys. Maybe bring disc down a little bit. And maybe we'll see that. Obviously, it's Friday. They usually do class changes. If you don't want to miss those, make sure to hit the subscribe button. But the healer balance is a very big deal. For ranged, I'm a bit surprised to see Shadow Priest so high. I think it's likely the buffs that they did to Void Weaver recently, where they buffed the Void Torrent, they buffed the explosion effect from the collapsing Void. That's actually propping Shadow Priest up a lot, and you're also just still kind of unkillable. I think Shadow Priest is still the hardest spec in the game to kill, and when the game is really fast, if you can be immortal, that's definitely going to help you a lot. So I do think that's why we see Shadow Priest up here, and I've seen Shadow Priest paired up with a lot of powerful classes like Windwalker or Rogues, and those kind of seem like a really good kind of standardized comp at the moment. But the overall representation for ranged is not that bad. Even Arcane and Fire, which were, last season, they were like 0.35%. No one was playing them, are getting close to 4%. Ellie Shaman is definitely a range spec that I think needs a little bit of attention. We saw buffs to Demo and Destro. Definitely Destro enjoyed those buffs a lot. I think Demo's still, climbing up a bit as well. But Ellie, I think, needs a little bit more help on it specifically. May want to tone down the aim shots, because there are some aim shot builds where I was getting like 6 million crits. It was kind of ridiculous. And maybe look at some of the survivability around Shadow Priest, because I think that's the main reason why it's actually still just up here. Frost, Af, still strong positions. Dev, even BM. I mean, BM last season was like 30% of the range. It's still holding strong at 7%. I think a lot of players are debating whether Marksman or Beastmastery is better. I think in the burst situation, depending on how they tune it, and they do typically tune away from burst damage, BM probably ends up overtaking Marksman in the long run. But we have to wait and see what the tuning is for today. Og is still really low at 0.43%, even though I played it recently and it actually felt pretty good. It felt like it was actually in a pretty viable position. So I don't know if people are just playing it because they just don't like this spec. It's basically it's a little bit more complicated Dev Evoker. I honestly think it's harder to play than Dev. And maybe that's the reason. It's like, hey, I can just get some easy rating with an easier spec, so why would I bother? Maybe it's the same thing with Rogue. That's why we see Rogue at 2%, 1%, or his Assassinations at 8%, because maybe it's just easier to do it. And that's why they're choosing that spec. Arms Warrior still held the number one spot even despite the nerfs. I think offensively it's still really good. But defensively, I think it's going to be held back. Fortunately, that probably means you're going to be on the radar for nerfs. And if you get nerfed, like Windwalker, Demon Hunter, like all these guys are ready to take your spot. They are really ready. They are all really good. A lot of these melee are really good, and they are ready to take your spot. Feels like it's kind of just like not a great patch to be a DPS shaman. Ellie and Enhance, I think, are both struggling. Survival's got some sleeper mechanics that are definitely helping it, which is why I think its representation is higher than it has been throughout season 1. 4% is actually much higher. So this also plays into the fact that there were so many changes that no one knows 100% what is really good. I've seen almost nobody agree 100% on what specs are top performers. I've seen some people put Fire Mage on absolute Giga S tier. I've seen them put on the bottom tier. I don't think anybody knows 100% with certainty, which is why we see this actually kind of like more even representation, right? Usually the top ends are like 30. Healer is obviously, this is really badly skewed, but DPS sometimes is like 30% top heavy, and then the bottom ones are like 2%, less than 1%. This is a lot healthier. Outlaw Rogue is only at 1.21%, and I feel like Outlaw Rogue is probably just like waiting for its chance. It's waiting for its chance to come back with changes coming through, because I can't believe that Outlaw Rogue is bad. I can't. I really can't. I don't know if maybe all the Rogue main players are trying to, play with the sub rework and see if it's actually good, and that's why it's only been a couple days. And then other Rogues are just sticking to Assassination because it's been consistent and it's a little bit easier. And they know that it can get them results, and that's why we see its representation so high. A lot of Rep Paladins feel like Rep Paladin is the worst thing in the game, because their Templar's verdicts aren't hitting that hard. But I'm watching Vanguard stream. I'm playing Rep Paladin myself. Like, I'm getting 2 million plus Hammer of Lights easy. I'm getting 1 million final verdicts, 800 to 1 million. I think that Ret is doing pretty well where it is. I would say, compositionally, it can struggle. You get a lobby where it's a lot of casters, no Mortal Strike. Yeah, you're probably going to lose. But if you get in a lobby with Mortal Strikes, I feel like Rep Paladin can absolutely still carry and dominate. Unholy still holds a decently healthy representation at 5.63%, when I would consider Unholy close to the weakest melee, if not the weakest melee, and it's actually still coming in at number 9 out of 13 overall, which I don't know if is good for you, because I don't know if that means you're going to get any more buffs or not, because I do think Unholy actually does need a little bit of a tune-up in that regard. Enhance's tune-up, I feel like it's just because of its limited mobility. It's the same thing with Survival. Survival and Enhance are both in a similar position where like they can get crazy damage out with Primordial Storm and with Flanking Strike, but if you can't get like good enough uptime, stay in the fight, like that's where you really struggle as these specs. Or something like a Windwalker can just stay in the fight indefinitely. But I could definitely see Windwalker catching more nerfs towards Crackle builds and towards Slicing Winds builds, because those ones are definitely looking really good. Now we talked about the corruptions earlier. Like, what's going to happen with Demon Hunter and get corruption to it? Don't do it, Blizzard. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Just don't do the corruption. Just don't do it, please. Oh God, please just nerf it by 99%. I don't know if I can handle it. I don't know if I can handle it, man. I got bad memories from BFA, dude. The vibes are off. I don't know if I can handle that. But honestly, with the first 5 days going through, I think their main focus needs to be on healer balance, and the same probably for Mythic Plus, and that's why I think Disc will end up getting nerfed. So kind of touch these guys up, a little bit of buffs, bring these guys up so more people want to play healer, because we need more healers, and damage right now is crazy. So like bring these guys up 100%. Ranged and melee, I think, is pretty solid, and we have to kind of like have more time to play this out a little bit, but there are some tweaks you can make. I think any ability that's hitting over like 3 million damage probably needs to be at least the variance, right? Like, can my Marksman Hunter sometimes hit for 1 million aim shot or a 7 million aim shot? You know, like if you nerf aim shot across the board baseline, well then when it hits the low variance, I'm doing nothing. And it can still hit the high variance. So the nerf isn't just lower aim shot damage. The nerf needs to be lower the variance. Look at the modifiers that are buffing aim shot and address the modifiers, not the baseline ability. So that's what I'm going to be looking for as far as like the class balance changes coming through. But as far as DPS specs, I think there's way more viability for DPS than in Season 1. The MMR is in a much better position. And if you're playing a Disc Priest, you're pretty happy. And honestly, Shaman and Paladin, I think, are still really good as well. And hopefully the rest of you guys get some buffs here on Friday. And this season could definitely be moving into a really good direction. But those are my thoughts. Those are the stats. And it's a little bit of news. So thank you guys very much for watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the discussion. And I will see you in the next one.